Hey everybody, so today we turn to modernism. Modernism is extremely important because it's the age that we live in. We're in the modernist age, and a lot of our political institutions and the way we think about the world comes directly out of this. So we're going to talk about the rise of modernism this week. Next week we'll turn to some of the effects of it and how it works itself out in our culture. And then we'll end this cycle by talking about postmodernism, some critiques of the modernist movement. So modernism's big question is, how do we know? And it begins with a fundamental insight, which is most of the way we know stuff is by investigating cause and effect. Now you'll remember cause and effect from way back in Aristotle. A modernist picks that up and believes that most of how we come to know something is by investigating cause and effect. So for example, if this ball falls and hits the ground, then I know how that happened by thinking about the cause of the ball falling and hitting the ground. And the answer, upon investigation, is gravity. And in fact, it just works, right? So the ball falls, we know that the effect is it hitting the ground, and the cause of it falling is gravity. Okay, here's another example of cause and effect. We have Miss Josephine in her hammock. The cause is her pushing. The effect is her swinging. Pushing, swinging, cause and effect. Welcome to summer. But here's the problem with cause and effect. When we investigate the relationship between causes and effects, it's never 100% certain that what we call the cause is actually what produced the effect. So for instance, if I drop the ball, we say it's gravity, but nobody saw the gravity. We don't know for certain that that's what caused the ball to fall. This actually gets worse when you start to think about what gravity actually is. As you know, Newton said gravity was one thing, Einstein said gravity was something else, but do we really know for sure what it is? Well, no, because two very smart people had different ideas about what it is. So yeah, every time I drop the ball, it falls, but what's the actual cause of that falling? Another problem with cause and effect is that we're not necessarily sure, even if we see a direct connection between a cause and an effect, that the effect was produced by the cause. For example, here we have a hose putting water on a pavement, which is making the pavement wet. But do we really know that it's that water that's making this pavement wet? Look, the water goes all the way down there. But can you say with 100% certainty that it's this water that is making that pavement wet? I know this is a really strange way to think about it. Of course, it's the water from the hose that caused the sidewalk to get wet. But the problem is you just don't know with 100% certainty that that's the case. And in fact, if you look at that picture, it could be anything. The water could have seeped in from the ground, it could have rained, it could have come from another hose or any kind of thing like that. This analysis of cause and effect comes from a Scottish philosopher named David Hume, and this is exactly what Hume said. That cause and effect are really only appearances. It only appears that one event produces another event, and you can see the classic example of hailing a bus. If you call for a bus to stop or call for an Uber, you didn't make it stop, even though it appears that you did. And for Hume, that's exactly where all cause and effect lies. Every cause only seems or appears to be the cause of the effect that it seems to produce. If he's right about that, then the conclusion is really kind of scary, because ultimately then we cannot know anything. So Kant's great insight is that when you're trying to figure out what to know, you have to be careful about comparing apples to bananas. Except that's a grapefruit. So grapefruit to bananas. Okay, so who was Immanuel Kant? Well, Kant was a German philosopher, lived in the 1700s, 18th century. He really came to prominence in response to Hume's critique of cause and effect. Kant realized that if Hume was right, then we were in a lot of trouble because we could never say for sure why we know anything to be true or not. And his great insight is actually pretty simple. You have to distinguish between what we can know and what we cannot know. And here's what he meant by that. Kant believed that there are two kinds of things that we need to know. There are things that we can touch with our senses, so we'll call that the grapefruit side, and there are things that we cannot access with our senses. These are completely different, and the way we go about knowing them is completely different. In fact, Kant will say that you can really only know one side of that equation. You can only know things that you can touch with your senses. Everything else, not so knowable. So Kant's terms for these things are phenomena and noumena. On the one side are the phenomena, which is anything that is available to our senses. Kant says that we can know these things. On the other side are the noumena, which are things that are not available to our senses and that Kant says we cannot know. Okay, so I call this Kant's wall. It's kind of my name, but it works for understanding how Kant understands what we can know and cannot know. Here's how Kant's wall works. Kant says there is a wall between the things that we can know and the things we can not know. On the can know side, he calls this phenomenon, calls this side noumena. And as we discussed, what goes under the phenomena side is anything that you can perceive with our senses, and we use science to investigate it. Over here, it's everything else, but especially religion, morality, and feelings. Kant's wall. Here are some examples of phenomena and noumena. Kant would say that we can know anything that is available to our five senses. Those senses are sight.
Oh, that's pretty.
Touch. Smell. Hearing. And taste. Religion, emotion,
I love you.
Hey, that's wrong.
How do you know that?
Okay, that's all for today. A short introduction to Kant's wall. Next week, we'll look at some of the ways in which Western society has tried to apply these principles.